Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here on Transaction Monday because the Toronto Blue Jays have brought in Anthony Santander. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. And hey, they made a move. We haven't recorded since the Sasaki thing. We haven't recorded since the Miles Straw trade, but there's, been a weekend of angst, and the Blue Jays respond by landing a dude coming off a 44 home run season.
Yes, he would have led the Blue Jays by a healthy margin last year. Anthony Santander, you are a Toronto Blue Jay.
He is a great fit for the lineup. I think we're probably going to fall on maybe a little bit of different sides of this one. He's to me though, great fit, switch hitter coming off a year where he hit a career high of home runs. I mean, obviously that's a contract season, so you can say what you want about it, but he over the last few years has been one of the best home run hitters in baseball. Obviously in Baltimore, and he's going to be your cleanup hitter. He's going to slot into the four hole in Toronto, I would imagine, and there is your Vladimir Guerrero Jr. protection that was so needed last year. And I know, there's the red flags, there's stuff like that, but I think a guy who comes into the clubhouse is going to be a nice little like Teoscar replacement, basically. And the vibes are going to be high with Santander in the clubhouse, I think.
Yeah, 5-year deal. The AAV sounds like it's going to be in the 18-ish range, maybe slightly above. We don't have the exact figures yet in terms of the total dollar value. You are very excited by this. Me, the eternal optimist I am a little scared by A, the years, and B, the ball player. I think that, listen, before guys like, when Soto and so forth were on the board, he was maybe my fifth, sixth option, maybe. Obviously, those guys are no longer on the board. So, I mean, to get Santander is great, but it was not a guy that I even really had circled in terms of who I wanted. I mean, the fit was obvious. I think you pointed it out as early as probably our offseason preview episode as him being an obvious fit for the Blue Jays. I just was kind of lukewarm on him. The StatCast page has a lot of kind of gray. It has a little bit of red on it. The lollipop charts are okay. I mean, the defense, however you want to slice it, is kind of negligible. Listen, you're getting 44 homers, and even I can't argue with the power that he's going to add to this lineup for a team that desperately needed somebody to hit the ball out of the ballpark. However, I just am a little bit scared of him, and I don't know how he's going to age, and I don't know how good he actually is.
Yeah, I think I've said this here before. Like, it's a 5-year deal with reportedly an opt out. Of course, this is still a developing story as we're recording. So, we will still be finding out stuff in over the next few hours about this deal. But, you look at this deal, the Toronto Blue Jays needed to be concerned about 2025. And they might have found, for guys who are going to perform in 2025, like Anthony Santander is probably one of the safest bets that you were going to sign on the free agent market as far as hitters go. To as for guys who are going to hit home runs, like he's going to be an instant 30 home run boost at minimum to this lineup, I would imagine, and that is huge for them as they kind of take the shot in 2025. And if they're not able to extend Vladdy and they're not able to get Bo back, and everything kind of falls apart, like 2027 and 2028 are going to probably not be great years anyways. So, having Anthony Santander in the middle of your lineup in those years, even if it doesn't end up going well for him as a player, I mean, like you would probably be in a transition period. So I think you look at it and it's great for this team right now. It's great, I think, for showing a guy like Vladdy, hey, we made this move to give you some protection. We're looking, adding some stability into the next couple seasons, and it's a guy that's going to give them home runs, and they needed it more than anything. We've kind of been talking all offseason that they've taken all these big swings. They've been going after the top guys, and been coming up short. And when they, maybe you would want to do this for one of these other guys, right? I mean, I guess they kind of did it for Corbin Burns, right? Where you go above and beyond, or you kind of make the desperation play, which they did by adding the fifth year to this contract with Santander. And they did what they had to do to get the deal done. And you know what? I think credit to them for stepping up and making that move, even if it does come for a player that's not as exciting as a Corbin Burns or Roki Sasaki or Juan Soto or any of these guys. You know what? I think it's a win for them right now, and I'm excited to watch some home runs after a year where there were not very many of them.
You know what this move reminds me of? You know what it feels like? 2017, Edwin Encarnacion leaves the Blue Jays, and the Blue Jays, well, actually, it kind of happened in this reverse order where they went out and preemptively signed Kendrys Morales. And this feels a lot like when the Blue Jays signed Kendrys Morales ahead of the 2017 season, which promptly went very poorly. Now, they're not great comparables just in terms of pure production. Morales, I believe, was quite a bit older than Santander when he signed with the Blue Jays, and the Blue Jays were already kind of fading a little bit, and it kind of seemed like wasn't really like a move that the fans were in love with, whereas this one has a lot more kind of excitement. It just feels like kind of like a bookmarking, like an end of an era type of signing. And it feels like you've said, like you outlined, a desperation signing to try to salvage an era.
We
And
have
that
official tweet from Ken Rosenthal with the details, and so it is 5 years, 92.5 million with a club option for the sixth year, and the opt-out is actually after the third year, so after 2027. And the Blue Jays can void that by exercising the sixth year option, which would take it up to 110 million.
that's so much money for Anthony Santander. That sixth year is absolutely not going to be picked up. There's almost zero chance. I'm trying to think of the type of player Anthony Santander would have to become for that to become a legitimate possibility. He would have to become
We'd have to be
basically
like
Jose
Nelson
Bautista.
Cruz. Yeah.
He'd have to be incredible.
I mean, he's
I don't
still he's still 30, right? He just turned 30. So it's not like, I think you look at like Teoscar Hernandez getting 66 over 3, I believe it was, and he's 32, right? So I think if you're looking at like aging curves, like Santander is still on an okay part of that range, right? Like I know a lot of people would prefer Teoscar to Santander just based on the way that he hits the ball. But both of them chase. Teoscar whiffs a lot more than Santander, and he's a lot older. So I think that the cliff for Teoscar is coming a little bit sooner than it is for Santander. And I
Yeah,
think
but
you
I,
can
I
you can
think that the
guarantee
thing
that the
is,
next two
I
years are going to
don't
be fine for Santander.
I don't know because even if the cliff comes for Teoscar sooner, this who's going to produce better this year, Teoscar or Santander? Probably
I th I
Teoscar,
I, th I
and I
think
think the
it's I think
margin's
it's a
not
wash.
close.
I think it's a
No,
wash.
I
Yeah.
disagree.
Yeah,
Wholeheartedly
totally.
disagree with that.
Totally.
Are you kidding?
Teoscar is playing in a perfect park for him, so he's coming off a year where it's ideal, right? But I don't think that Teoscar is going to be out producing Santander by a significant margin.
Oh, I think that there's at least a 10 to 15 point WRC plus difference. I think
I don't
Teoscar
know.
is at least a 135 guy. And I think that with Santander, I think you're praying for 120. I think it wouldn't be shocking if he ended up in the 115, 110 range.
Teoscar is coming off a year where he had a 360 WOBA and had the 134 WRC plus, and he had a 346 X WOBA. Like he
I don't
overperformed his stuff, right? And
I
and
know he overperformed, but it's also the Dodgers, and you also, as you mentioned, he's playing in the perfect ballpark. Of course, he's going to overperform. This is a guy that's an easy 130 WRC
I
plus guy.
mean,
Santander is at least, I think, 10 points worse than that. I
I
don't
don't
think
think
that these
so.
guys are in the same category.
I don't think so. I think they're the same player, very similar, if not, Santander's coming into Toronto now where he has the left field wall that's not a million miles away when he's hitting right-handed. So I think that there's only going to
But
be some
how
improvement
often is he
there.
hitting? He's not hitting right-handed as often because half the league throws right-handed. He's
Yeah,
hitting
that's
left-handed
that
most of the
that
time.
that's fair, but I mean it's still a consideration for when you look at how many home runs that he hit last year for have like a third of his at bats or whatever you want to say, coming with that wall taking away home runs.
I don't think that this is a signing that you make out of rationality. I think it's a signing you make out of desperation. Now, the question is, how much do you feel that the Blue Jays need to be desperate? The Jays need to be desperate, But I think 5 years for Anthony Santander is a level of desperation that, throws caution to the wind. I mean, think about, even next year, because the idea is that if you're competitive this year, and ideally you're competitive next year when you've somehow found a way to extend Vladdy, and who knows, maybe you've brought in another guy via trade, maybe you've developed a guy, maybe a guy like Alec Manoah has come out of nowhere and has revived his career or something like that, right? Like, we don't know how things are going to be in a year from now, because a year from now, we were talking about whether or not Vladdy had a future with the team. Now it's you have to get him signed, and it doesn't really matter what the price tag is. So let's say things go right this year. Let's say that things are going well, and the Blue Jays go into next offseason looking to improve again. 5 years for Anthony Santander considerably messes up the window for them to make changes and to improve the team moving forward. That's my concern. And I know that the concern should be this year. But I think you're hedging a lot on a year where you're projecting as like an 85, 86 win team if things go right. And then you need a little bit of additional help to get over the 88, 89 win mark to maybe end up in the playoffs. But then you're staring down a cliff.
I mean, does the Santander move make them a playoff team this year?
No, not I don't think so. I think it's close. Like, I think that the
Here's
Santander and the Hoffman move and another bat or another pitcher make them a fringe playoff contender. But Hoffman and Santander alone right now don't make them a playoff team to me. But also, the Kansas City Royals were in a playoff team to me heading into next year. I mean, I had a lot of faith in them. I think I had Bobby Witt as a MVP contender, and he of course had a great year, and I had Cole Reagans as a potential Cy Young candidate, and he looked like he was going to make a run, but or the Tigers are maybe even a better example of a team that you didn't think was going to be that great, and obviously took the leap that last year and evolved. So we don't know who the Blue Jays are going to be next year, and ideally they're going to be a competitive and really good team. It's just, it feels like throwing caution to the wind, and I think it's to the point of almost like negligence. This episode of the Bird's Eye View podcast is brought to you by BioSteel. Use code Bird's Eye View at checkout for 20% off your order at biosteel.ca. Again, that's code Bird's Eye View at checkout for 20% off your order. For all your high performance hydration needs, visit biosteel.ca. Thank you again to BioSteel for sponsoring today's episode.
somebody was going to give him a contract similar to this, right? And it was just the Blue Jays that were in the unfortunate position of being the most desperate and in need of that. I mean,
But
there was,
you're using the
like
term
Pete Alonso.
unfortunate. You're using the term unfortunate. Like, do you hear yourself?
Well, I mean, I like look, I think it's a fine deal. I think it's fine. I think he's a good hitter that's going to be a good hitter for the next 2 to 3 years. It might be a bad deal in 3 years, but who knows what 3 years look like, right? Like 3 years from now, George Springer and Kevin Gossman aren't Toronto Blue Jays. The only guys who are like Jose Barrios, maybe if he doesn't opt out, Andres Jimenez, um, Yariel
Hoffman.
Rodriguez, like Hoffman, right? Like those are the only guys that are there in 3 years into the future. So I think, like it's tough to look at it and really worry about 2027 and 2028 to me because they are so desperate to extend this window right now. And Santander is a guy that's a piece that can do that. And sure, maybe, you'd prefer some of these other guys, but at this point in the offseason, they couldn't go into this year without one of these bats, right? And Alex Bregman is going to be getting 150 million, maybe more. Pete Alonso is going to be getting a deal with, a 1 year, 2 years where before he's hitting back into the free agent market. And I think, Santander is just kind of the guy. He's probably the cheapest of those three who gives you the home runs that this team realistically did need.
So talk me off the ledge here, because I've, been a little bit negative to say the least. And you obviously have a very different perspective than I do. And you kind of outlined it there, but like, is this a signing that you feel makes the Blue Jays competitive, makes the Blue Jays better,
I, I,
and makes the Blue Jays worth being serious about?
I mean, they are a better team today than they were yesterday. With Anthony Santander in the middle of their lineup, they are a better team. And I get like looking at the you know I love to look at all the advanced stuff too, right? And you look at the quality contact numbers and the chase rate and everything, and it does kind of scare you A little bit, but I also think, you kind of consider the type of profile, right? Like we scream and yell for players to like pull and hit the ball in the air. And I know this is maybe not the best way to look at it, but you look at his ex-WOBA on Baseball Savant, which doesn't consider spray rate, right? And Anthony Santander is a guy that pulls the ball in the air. And you look at a pitcher list ex-WOBA, which does consider spray rate, so it kind of takes into account that he does pull the ball a lot, and his ex-WOBA is a lot better. It's red on the baseball or on the pitcher list page. So I think, it does look a little bit better to me considering the type of profile that he has and his durability. He's a guy who's been durable for so long, and he's going to be able to come in and at least give you some slug in the middle of their lineup. And that's desperately what we've wanted them to have, right? And so whether it was him or Pete Alonso or Alex Bregman, I think that they needed one of those guys. And to get Santander, who was, one, the cheapest, and two, the guy coming off the year with the most home runs. I think that it's a fine fit, or it's a great fit, sorry, and it's a fine contract that if it ages really poorly in 2027, 2028, it's, you're only going to be on the hook for probably 2 years of that, and then, who knows who's even on the team by that point, because they're going to have so many moves to make by then.
I don't know. I just think that the thing I keep coming back to is like the whole punting down the line. And it's almost a lazy comparison, but reminds me of when the Maple Leafs signed the David Clarkson contract, and there was this famous Dave Nonis quote where he was like, "We'll worry about 2020 when it gets here." Well, 2020 made its way over, and he was out of hockey at that point. It's a different sport, it's a different set of circumstances. But whenever you're looking at a contract and you're like, we're punting the last 2 years, that's how you end up with George Springer being your leadoff guy in 2024 with a 650 OPS.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair point. And I mean, it's one of those things where if George Springer had, yeah, it's tough because that contract was really good. And if George Springer was healthy in 2021 and, maybe a little bit more healthy in 2022, who's to say what those teams end up doing?
Yeah, I don't disagree, right? Like George Springer is a far superior player at his best to Anthony Santander. But this feels a lot like, the Jays are making a big swing for George Springer at the time. This is their big swing for the year.
Yeah, and well, I mean, we kind of we can talk about this a little bit because we haven't had the chance to talk about it. But I mean, the Miles Straw thing where they make that trade and it pushes them over the first CBT line, and then don't end up getting Roki Sasaki, right? So basically they make the play for Santander, or sorry, for Sasaki by adding Straw, basically saying we're fine with going over the first CBT for Sasaki. And then now they add this deal on top of that, which pushes them over the second CBT. And it's funny because they're gonna be up there on in the payroll rankings of Major League teams. And they, like you said, I don't think this deal makes them a slam dunk playoff team, but I think it definitely pushes them into the wild card conversation. Like are the Blue Jays better than the Tigers?
Like
I
that's
would
again,
say
it's kind
so.
of a wash. Yeah, I'd say that's roughly a wash. Like, listen, your point about this making them competitive in relative terms is well taken, and I don't disagree. Right, like this year, you gotta you gotta try because Bo is good as gone. It sounds like, and Vlad, it's gonna take a
Well, Bo
Herculean
Bo
effort
Bo
to.
was Bo was recruiting Roki Sasaki, so maybe he's planning on locking it up.
Yeah, that would be quite the change in tune, I think. But listen, here's my kind of not like final thought, but my big picture thought. Santander makes the Blue Jays better. I don't think that's something you can argue. And I think that Santander is going to have a productive 2025, and he might even have a productive 2026, and might even have a productive 2027.
You fingers crossed that he does, because then he
Fingers
opts out.
crossed. Fingers crossed. But it just feels like this is the Jays scrambling because they've missed a bunch of guys. It says them throwing money at a dude because no one else would take it. And it screams something that they are going to regret within 18 months.
Let's take a look at the projections before we finally wrap up here. He is which projection system would you like me to use?
Let's give him the most favorable look.
All right,
I'll
we're
let you
going
dealer's choice.
we're going to Oopsie, my new favorite projection system because you really want to name a projection system Oopsie. Anyways, Oopsie has him projected for a 250 average, 319 OBP, 474 slug with 34 home runs, 99 RBIs, and a 120 WRC plus and 2.7 WAR. It's a good player.
It's a good player. I mean,
So Oopsie, it takes into account like bat speed and kind of stuff like that as well, which some of the other ones don't.
who's
So
that projection system from?
I would have to look it up, but I know that it does include the bat speed.
That's been your go-to of late, eh?
It has been. I do like the Oopsie.
Great name for a projection system. Oh well, I was thinking about signing this guy, but I saw an oopsie. He was really that's crazy. Incredible name for a projection system.
Yeah, so
Um,
Oopsie considers it's a Fangraphs somebody on Fangraphs, and it takes into account Stuff Plus, for pitchers, and where are we for hitters here? For hitters, it takes um, barrel rate, Wobacon skill, usual hitter components, and swing speed as
so
well.
it's a bit more of kind of a granular system than maybe something a little bit more like traditional.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anthony Santander, Toronto Blue Jay. I think that's the good news. I think the more compelling thing is what's next because they can't be done. But I don't know how much more finagling they're planning on doing.
All right, before we get out of here, let's build a lineup real quick with currently where the Toronto Blue Jays are at. Um, do you think that George Springer is going to be the leadoff guy?
I can't imagine that they have him as the leadoff guy, but I'm not sure who is the leadoff guy. I know you like Will Wagner in that spot
Yeah,
potentially. I'm
I think
also not
that's
sure if he
fine.
has a spot on the Blue Jays anymore, given the Anderson Menez ad. And
Sorry, before we do that, I guess we could say what is next because they're what did we say 18 million away from the third CBT
yeah,
line?
they have a little bit of wiggle room, and they probably have enough room to add a pitcher. I mean, Max Scherzer sounds like he is
He's
a very obvious connection.
yeah, a guy that they are reportedly interested in, according to Shai Davidi and Ben Nicholson Smith, which, hey, you know what? I mean, it'd be cool to see him in the jersey. It would definitely be one of those automatic, like, add him to the compilations of legends playing in random jerseys. Like
he will
he would,
be he will be part of the Kevin Garnett Nets
yeah,
and Matt Ryan Colts and
yeah, whoever you want, like Hakeem in the Raptors jersey, all
Patrick
those
Ewing
type of guys.
in the Orlando Magic and
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
it would be one of those, but I mean it'd be kind of fun. I mean, if you kind of look at the pitchers available, like as far as guys you'd be interested. I mean, Jack Flaherty at this point, like if you can get him on a deal under 18 million, that would be another one that I would maybe be, long term, maybe just kind of not a huge fan of because he's kind of been so up and down. Nick Pivetta, I don't think that Nick Pivetta is now going to be a Blue Jay because they just gave up their QO player. We didn't talk about that, but the Jays are going to lose pick number 49 in the draft, their second selection. As a bit of a draft guy, it kind of hurts. Kind
don't
of
love
hurts to see
that.
them give up the second round pick, but and they lose $500,000 in international cash, but it's okay because they just got 2 million more.
That's what the Miles Straw trade was for.
Yeah, if only the QO international cash was like for the year that you signed them instead of the following year. Oh, and apparently the deal has deferred money as well.
Yeah, which I mean, I don't know how much that really matters, but It's a factor,
Hey, good for them for putting their hat in the Dodgers ring, I guess.
I guess.
Spencer Turnbull is a guy who was good last year. I think he had some sort of shoulder injury. Quintana is obviously the big name. I guess Quintana is probably the safest option available as far as a guy who's coming off a decent season that you can probably count on for some innings. Um, Outside of that, I mean, there aren't really anybody else. There isn't really anybody else that I think is going to be getting less than 18 million that you can slide in there. Um, Unless they're just going to say screw it and we're going to jump over that third CBT and sign like Alex Bregman.
Yeah, which is a bit of a hard thing to imagine, but I mean, maybe I don't know. I feel like there was some word earlier in the offseason that Alex Bregman was part of that exclusive break in case of emergency CBT group, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's something that's still on the table when we're talking about the third one instead of the first one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, again, I think the QO there, the second QO is going to be tough for them to sign, but you know what? Maybe they're so desperate that they're not really concerned about the draft and their
Yeah.
international pool money, which
Yeah,
would be
it's getting to that stage.
okay. Any other thoughts before we run?
Well, let's do that lineup very quickly.
Sure,
So
sure.
so I think leading off, I think it I mean realistically, you're probably looking at George Springer. I don't really see a
I
universe.
think he's so many home runs away from the all-time leadoff record, kind of like one of those things where you probably slot him there, and then again, if the year goes poorly, you do it like last year where you take him out of that
Yeah,
spot.
he probably and then number two, I think you're looking at probably Vlad. Um, I guess by virtue of the signing for protection purposes, I guess that Santander is three. I mean, he feels more like a four, or maybe
I
Bo is
mean,
three.
Vladdy only hits three though, right? Like that's the thing is that he likes hitting three instead of two,
I
even though
guess.
he should be hitting second.
I mean, I don't know. Are we building ideal lineups, or are we building the lineup we
I mean,
think? I mean,
we just put George Springer in the leadoff spot, so I don't think we're building the ideal lineup.
so I guess we're probably putting Bo at two then.
I think you're going Springer, Bo, Vlad, Santander,
Santander, Will Wagner five, I guess,
maybe
as your designated hitter, I guess.
Kirk,
Kirk five. I don't mind
Alejandro.
Kirk five. I don't love Kirk five. Where's Jimenez slotting this? Where's Miles Straw slotting this?
Is Miles Straw gonna okay? Miles Straw gonna play a game for the Blue Jays because I feel like he almost can't for what he represents at this point.
I'm sure he will. I'm sure he will.
I know
I'm
with
sure he'll make
he's
the opening day roster because of Varsho's injury, and he'll
yeah
be off the Blue Jays by about
he's
June.
he's not even on the 40 man,
Yeah, I
which
mean
is crazy.
he'll probably end up on the 40 man at some point.
They're gonna DFA somebody. They're gonna have to DFA somebody to put him on the roster. Oh, they're gonna have to DFA somebody to bring in Santander. So,
Yeah, it's about to be a bloodbath, isn't it?
oh man, crazy.
Varsho's in there somewhere in the 6-7 range.
Well,
Ernie
he would
Clement's in
just be
there.
in the straw spot
Yeah, you got
eventually.
Ernie Clement in there, and Andres Jimenez as your 9-hole hitter. I don't know. There's something shaping up. I
I
wouldn't say it's
think
great, but it's shaping up.
off the cuff, Springer, Bo, Vlad, Santander, Will Wagner, Alejandro Kirk. I'm calling it Dalton Varsho for now. Ernie Clement, Andres Jimenez.
That makes sense. That all tracks. I think if that's your opening day lineup, you're probably not thrilled, but it's not the worst lineup. It's better than last year, so I'll say that much.
Yeah,
There's,
there's gonna be some home runs hit by this team, and
I appreciate that.
thankfully, you know what? It's if you're gonna be bad, at least be fun. But
We'll see.
I
We'll
don't
see.
think they're
We'll
necessarily
see.
I don't think they're necessarily going to be awful. I think Santander. We didn't talk about
Oh
the defense
boy.
as well. I know we keep on saying okay, one more thing, but defense as well. He was bad defensively. I'm sure playing next to Varsho will help that out,
And Miles Straw, of course.
and Miles Straw, of course. But I think Santander will get his fair share of time um, DHing,
Yeah, I would imagine that's probably the case.
and I
They
bet
still
you
don't have.
his first base glove gets a little bit of use this year too.
Yeah, they still don't have enough like a DH, slotted in perpetuity. Springer's gonna get some love there. Vlad's gonna get some love there. Santander's gonna get some love there. I'm sure any number of guys will get some love there. Kirk might get some love there, although they don't really have a backup catcher anymore, so that's another discussion. But There'll be a rotating cast of guys. I do think though they need one more stick or one more pitcher. I would say.
I would agree with that. There's still moves to be made, and we are excited to see what happens. I'm going to take the last word since I'm the one who usually finishes this, but very exciting. The Blue Jays got a big bat in the middle of the lineup. Don't listen to anything Jory said earlier. We are excited
Absolute
to have
hater, despicable slander.
we are very excited to have a switch hitter that hits home runs in the middle of the Blue Jays lineup. So that is going to do it for us here today at the Bird's Eye View Podcast. Make sure to hit and subscribe to the like buttons if you're watching on YouTube. You can find us there at the Bird's Eye View Pod. If you're listening along on the podcast provider of your choice, make sure to drop a follow and review. You can follow us all on Twitter. I am at Worden_Zach. Jori is at Jori Negin-Shecter. And the pod is at BEV_pod. Thank you so much for listening.